bladder. D. Seminal vesicle. Seminal vesicle secrete fluid alongside the corpus gland and the prostate gland, which is added to the sperm, which constitutes the seminal fluid. That's what seminal vesicle does. Then bladder is the place where urine is stored temporarily before they are excreted in the body. So when your bladder is full, you feel pressed, you want to go to the toilet, that's not a passage for both urine and semen, just urine that is there and it's like a store, a temporary store. Then the third one says ureter. That is the tube that comes from the kidney that goes to the bladder. When the urine is formed in the kidney, it is passed through ureter to the bladder. So that is not the part. Is not the part that it doesn't serve as a passage for semen. Then urethra, I have explained earlier. That is the part where urine comes out from, and also semen during ejaculation. So that gives us the answer A, urethra. Then the next question is diagrammatic, showing the female reproductive system. It says the developing embryo is usually contained in the part labeled A4, B3, C2, D1. The part labeled 1 is called fallopian tube. Then the part labeled 2 is the uterus. The part labeled 3 is the ovary, while the part labeled 4 is the vagina. Fallopian tube is the tube that is connected to the ovary, both the ovary and the uterus. So when a ripe ovary is released through the fallopian tube that holds it, that's called part. Then the ovary is the egg that has the tendency of being fertilized. The uterus is the womb that the baby stays, or the fertilized ovary stays and develops. Then the vagina is the passage of the sperm during ejaculation, and also the passage of the fetus when the baby is being born. Now, the question again, the developing embryo is usually contained in the part labeled what? I said 1 fallopian tube, 2 uterus, 3 ovary, D vagina. The developing embryo is contained in the uterus, that's the womb, that's where the developing embryo, that is the baby, stays. Then the next question says the function of the part labeled 3 is to do what? The part labeled 3 is ovary, and its function, option A says to produce egg cells, B says to protect sperm during fertilization, C says to secrete hormones during coitus, D says to protect the developing embryo. The function of ovary is to produce ovum, that's the egg, and that's the answer, option A. Ovary produce egg cells. They don't protect sperm during fertilization, they don't secrete any hormone during coitus, and they don't protect the developing hormone, the developing embryo. The only thing they do is to produce the egg cells that has the tendency of being fertilized in case there is coitus or mating. The next question says, an example of a fruit that develops from a single carpel is okra, B, tomato, C, beans, D, orange. Bean is an example of fruit that develops from a single carpel. That's option C. The next question says, the male reproductive organ of a flower is the A, petal, B, sepal, C, carpel, D, stamen. The male reproductive organ of a flower is the stamen. That's where you have the anther and the filaments, where that is what carries that's the male reproductive organ. That's option D. Then the next question says estrogen is a hormone synthesized in the anterior pituitary, B, adrenal cortex, C, ovaries, D, testes. Estrogen is an hormone secreted or synthesized in the female, in the ovaries. So that is option C. And that leads us to the last question we'll be considering under reproduction. Still on form and structure, we'll be looking at growth. But growth is one of the topics in the JAMB syllabus that is very few. What you're expected to know under this is just the type of germination in plants, FPG and hypoG germination. So we have very few questions on them. And the first question is this: the most reliable estimate of growth is by measuring changes in A, length, B, volume, C, surface area, and D, dry weight. The most reliable. You can measure growth, you can estimate growth by measuring the length, the volume, surface area, and even the dry weight. But the question is asking for the most reliable estimate of growth. And the most reliable estimate of growth is the dry weight. After the organism has been dried and the whole water content has been taken away, then that you can take the weight, and that is the most reliable estimate. Others can be changed with time, but dry weight, once it is dry, once you measure it today, that's just it like that. Then the next question says, in FPG germination, the cotyledons are A, carried above the ground by the elongating hypocotyls, B, pulled underground by the elongating hypocotyls, C, pulled underground by the elongating epicotyl, D, carried above the ground by the elongating epicotyl. There are two types of germination in plants. We have hypogy and epig germination. Epig germination is the one in which the cotyledons are carried above the ground, while hypogy germination is the one in which the cotyledons are carried under the ground. So this question, from the definition I've just given, as from the four options that we have here, two has been eliminated in the sense that epig germination, cotyledons are carried above the ground. So option B and C are ruled out. They are not pulled under the ground by anything. Then we have option A and D, carried above the ground. One says by the elongating hypocotyl and the other says by the elongating epicotyl. But in epig, it is still the elongating epicotyl that carries the cotyledon above the ground. So that gives us option D, carried above the ground by the elongating epicotyl. The next question. For growth to occur in organisms, the rate of A, food storage must be low. B, catabolism must exceed that of anabolism. C, anabolism must exceed that of catabolism. D, food storage must be high. When we talk about nutrition in relation to growth, talk about catabolism and anabolism. Catabolism is the process of breaking down food substances into smaller or simpler substances, complex food substances into simpler structures, while anabolism is the building up of simple substances, simple food substances into a higher one. So anabolism is the one that must exceed catabolism, that is, the rate of building up must exceed the rate of breaking down. That is when growth will occur in an organism, and that is option C. Anabolism must exceed that of catabolism. The next question says, epig germination of a seed is characterized by more rapid elongation of the hypocotyl than the epicotyl. B, more rapid elongation of the epicotyl than the hypocotyl. C, equal growth rates of both the hypocotyl and epicotyl. D, lack of growth of the hypocotyl. Of course, both epicotyl and hypocotyl will elongate, but because it is epig germination, the epicotyl will elongate more rapidly than the hypocotyl, and that gives us option B. In epig germination, it is the epicotyl that has the rapid elongation more than the hypocotyl, and that is option B. The next question is diagrammatic, showing 3 stages in seed germination, and at the 3rd stage there is a part labeled 1. And the question is, the main function of the part labeled one is what? That's like the foliage, the first set of leaves that is coming out. That's what is labeled. The options: A. Store food for the young plants. B. Pull the young shoots above the ground. C. Store water for the seedling. D. Protect the young plumule. You know, in seed germination, after the seed has absorbed water, then we have two major parts that will come out from the seed. We have the plumule and the radicle. The plumule is the future shoot, while the radicle is the future root, or the root that is coming out of that particular seed. So the radicle goes down, the plumule goes up. Then the part that is labeled one, that I said is the first foliage, will not store food for the young plants, and it's not the one that is pulling the shoot above the ground. It doesn't store anything, it doesn't store food or water for the seedling, but rather it protects. You see, it's closed. You look at the diagram, it's closed, so it protects the young plumule, that is the young shoot that is coming out. Option D, protects the young plumule. Then the next question on that says, the type of germination illustrated is termed A. Hypogee germination, hypogee. B. Epicotyle. C. Epigee. D. Hypocotyle. I said we have two types of germination, hypogee and epigee. So that rules out the epicotyle.